you're ready. Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Carly Porter. I hail from northern Utah. I'm a born and raised Utah native, and I have been quilting since 2009, but I have been an artist my whole life. So when I introduce myself, I like to introduce myself as an artist who happens to use fabric and thread versus a quilter who makes art quilts, because I've been creative and artistic ever since I can remember. But when I beheld my first quilting machine, I got hooked immediately and have yet to move on from the fabric and thread medium to anything else. So fabric and thread is absolutely my favorite medium of making art. Now, deeper within that, my favorite part of the quilt making process is definitely the free motion quilting. My introduction into the world of quilting was a little bit backwards, head first, upside down. It was a very non-traditional introduction into what free motion quilting is, what long arm quilting is, what modern quilting is. My earliest experience of quilting was, I remember laying on the living room floor with my mom and my grandma and my aunts and a few of her, girlfriends, and tying quilts with yarn. So that was the only experience that I had with quilting when I was a little girl. I did also make a couple of rag quilts, but yeah, my early childhood memories of sewing were not really quilting based, but they were beanbag based. I remember my mom, the first thing she taught me how to make on a sewing machine was a beanbag, or you take 2 squares of fabric, put them right side together, sew around 3 sides, flip it right side out, fill it with beans or corn or whatever else you can find in the pantry, and then sew up and serge the final edge. And I can't tell you how many needles I broke in the process of running over corn kernels and dried beans and rice and sometimes rocks from the yard, because I thought, oh, that's like a bean, and we ran out of beans, so I guess I'm making rock bean bags now. So from a young age, I understood the concept of a sewing machine, but when it came to quilting and machine quilting in particular, that world kind of exploded for me in 2009. So I graduated in the spring of 2009 from high school, and that summer I got married. And from right after I got married, I remember I was really just looking for a full-time job. So in high school, I skipped so many core curriculum classes to sneak into the art room that I don't know how I graduated high school, but somehow I did. And so when I was done with high school, I honestly really didn't have plans to go to college. I thought, I just want to be an artist, or I just want to find a full-time job and make some money and, start doing this adult thing. And so the crazy backwards introduction into the quilting world was that my first job out of high school and after getting married was working for a quilting machine manufacturing company. So I did not know that quilting machines were a thing until I walked into a factory that was literally building them. And the first 9 months of working there, I was in a production team called Sew-Off, which is where we set up a machine and we test it and we do all these prescribed patterns to make sure that the machine does a good stitch. And then we take it down and we send it to shipping and ship it out. And so the first 9 months, for 40 hours a week, I was literally building muscle memory of free motion quilting. But I was not able to really explore my artistic side of that because we had to do the same patterns over and over and over again. But one thing that was cool about working there is that periodically they would have like refurbished machines that they would get back into the factory that they couldn't sell as new. And so they would let their employees take them home on loan. And so about, I don't know, maybe a year and a half after working there, I got on the loaner list, and my husband at this point was in college and working towards his computer science degree. And so I got this little loaner sit-down quilting machine in our little basement apartment, and I'd come home from work after stitching for 8 hours, setting up the stand-up long arms, and then all of the exciting designs that were in my head that I wasn't able to stitch out during the day, I would come to this little sit-down quilting machine. It was very primitive. It didn't even have like a screen. It was just you push the button and the needle moves and there's no feed dogs to pull your fabric around. And so my husband would be knee deep in homework and I would just be quilting all of these things that I had drawn in my sketchbooks and just design ideas that I had in my head that I thought, oh, I really want to try quilting this out. And so from 2009 to 2011, I was spending a good, I don't know, anywhere from 4 to 10 hours a day quilting, just moving my arms, whether it was on a sit-down machine that I was moving around or a long arm stand-up with handlebars. And so that's what I mean by like totally backwards, head first, learning how to free motion quilt, because at this point in time, I didn't even have a domestic sewing machine of my own. So like I started quilting fabric and making like little 10-inch pieces of quilted fabric, and I wanted to turn them into zipper pouches. And so I was literally using my arms as my own feed dog to sew a zipper onto a piece of fabric because I didn't have a zipper foot or a machine that could use a zipper foot. And so it really was kind of backwards, but the thing that was really cool about it is, like I said at the beginning of this, I'm an artist who found fabric and thread and found tools that allow me to be a visual artist with fabric and thread, and instead of using paint and pencils and watercolor paper and all those other mediums that I had been exposed to as a child. And so the first quilt that I wanted to show you, it is kind of my claim to fame as like, oh my gosh, I'm a real quilter, a real free motion quilter. And it's actually not a graffiti quilting quilt, which might be what you know me for now. But this quilt really put me on the map, and it's a quilt that has like gone viral a couple times over the last decade. And sometimes it's a quilt that non-quilters have seen. And I'm like, okay, that's when you know that like you've made it, when non-quilters know your work and have seen it. So this quilt is called Shimmering Symphony, and it is one of my very favorite quilts that I've ever made. Now, the luxury of doing a trunk show for y'all is that I don't have to show you all of the terrible quilts that I made before I got to this one. So you just get to see the most beautiful quilt in my portfolio. But this quilt is really special for a couple of reasons. I mean, one of the reasons is that I entered it into a show in Houston and it won first place, and I won $10,000. So that's like crazy cool. But I was also very new in my quilting journey. So like to get that kind of validation, I was 21 years old, had been quilting for just a couple of years. So to be able to kind of hang beside a lot of very prestigious competitive quilters was like quite a notch in my belt. But the thing that makes me most proud of this quilt is that in all of my quilting experience, as I was trying to close the gap between my taste for my art and my skill level for my art, this was the quilt that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like really seeing progress of closing that gap. And so this quilt will always be really special to me for that purpose, because it's kind of really aged nicely in the sense that even now, having done this over a decade ago, I still look at this quilt and I'm very proud of the workmanship that went into it. And so this is a very special quilt to me for that reason, because it's such a huge part of my journey that was kind of the first taste that I got of realizing the difference and value of both outer validation and inner validation. Like I could have not won any prize for this quilt, and it's one that I still feel very proud of, because I was able to recognize that what I was intending to do on the fabric executed. So that gap, like I talked about, was closing after, you know, a few years of really putting in dedicated muscle movement practice time. So Shimmering Symphony is a fun quilt to show because of those reasons. So which leads me into more of my graffiti quilting journey. So I started quilting in 2009. This quilt won first place in 2012. And then that really kind of gave me a lot of oomph to be like, oh my gosh, maybe I could actually be a professional artist with fabric and thread. Like when I was in high school, I thought I want to do graphic design. And then I was like, okay, well, graphic designers, they design postcards and brochures and business cards and billboards, and it was very commercially driven. And so I just assumed that if I wanted to be a professional artist, it would have to be a commercial artist, someone who is like, you know, putting together like handouts or brochures or like marketing material. But after this quilt, I was like, oh snap, like I can actually just make something beautiful, and that could be my career. How do I do this? And so that's what really encouraged me to embark on the journey of figuring out how to find that sweet spot in a Venn diagram. So I think of it this way. It's like you have Batman and you have Bruce Wayne. So if we understand the story of Batman, Batman is cool and he fights crime and he has all these amazing things and he can do tricks and flips and really show off and like defend against evil. I don't know. But the only reason that Batman is cool and awesome and has the time and space is because Bruce Wayne is a billionaire who's like funding the whole thing, right? And so I started thinking, how can I find my Bruce Wayne and my Batman so that I can live in the middle of that Venn diagram of what is the thing that brings me joy and what is the thing that can bring me joy in my belly because my bills are paid and I have groceries in my fridge. And quilting became that thing, which was really, really cool. So I continued working in the production department of the quilting machine company. And as I was starting to develop my style, my own personal signature style of free motion quilting at home off the clock, I started showing my quilts to people, like taking them to, you know, my local guild meeting or showing them to my coworkers. And I started getting people asking me, how did you do that? How did you do that? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm an artist. I just did it. Like I just sat down with the fabric and the thread and did it. And so I want to show you some of my very earliest graffiti quilting quilts. And so you can kind of see the progression of not only my quilting style, but graffiti quilting and what it has become today. So graffiti quilting was, the first book was published in 2014. And so in 2024, we just celebrated the 10-year anniversary of graffiti quilting. So this next quilt I want to show you is very special to me. This one is, I'll tell you the title after I tell you the story of, and it'll make sense of why I named it what I did. But let me show you this up closer. So this quilt is also really cool and special to me because this was kind of the first graffiti quilting quilt that after I finished it, I kind of realized that I was on to something, that it wasn't just me, doodling on fabric, the same things that I was drawing in my sketchbook. It had a very like strong compositional structure to it that was like, oh wow, I'm actually kind of onto something here. And so I remember finishing this quilt and taking it to guild meeting and doing show and tell, right, as many guilds do. And I remember getting up to the front when it was my turn and holding it up so proud and saying, you guys, look what I made. And there was a guild member in the front row who said, oh my gosh, that is such a waste of thread. And I said, that's what I said. I was like, like I've never clutched pearls before until that moment. And I said, I'm sorry, like double take, what? And she said, well, you just used so much thread. You could have finished a whole king size quilt with the amount of thread that you put on that little fat quarter. And I was like, okay, number one, rude. I didn't say rude because I was, you know, I was still very novice and young in my journey. I'm not like, wasn't like in my power the way that I am now. But I remember just thinking like so taken back by what she said. And then I tried to explain to her like, well, wait, hold on. The whole reason that I used so much thread is because the fabric is just plain white and I want the thread to show up. Like the quilting is the part that I'm actually good at. And so I have to use that amount of thread so that I can get a really thick, rich line and make it really show up nicely. That's why I used colorful thread instead of thread that just blends into the fabric like the quilt police kept telling me to do. And so I was explaining this to her like, well, no, like the purpose is the thread. And she just said, well, that's just a lot of thread that you used. And you know, they make thicker threads and thinner threads, so that if you want thicker thread, you should have just used a thicker thread instead of overstitching so much. And so I was like, yeah, well, guess what? I'm only like 22 years old and I live in a basement apartment and I have this much of a budget to buy thread, so I'm not going to buy it in every color. Also, you're crazy. Like, that all came out of my head. What I said was, oh, okay, thank you. And I sat down and I didn't go back to that quilt because I realized, like, nobody defended me. So maybe that just was not the quilt for me. And that's okay. That's something that I've learned and healed from, as you can see, because now I can laugh about the story. But so actually, I take that back. I did go the next month because I made another graffiti quilting quilt that was equally as densely stitched. And the most fun part was to see her in the front row with her eye twitching, because she knew that I was wasting so much thread. And that was worth it alone, was just to watch her have a little conniption in the front row with her functional quilt. So I affectionately have named this quilt Waste of Thread. And it's one of my favorite quilts because it also, just like the quilt itself, was kind of the first graffiti quilting quilt that I was like, oh, wow, I'm onto something. There's something more here than just me doodling on fabric. There's some rhyme and some reason and some organization and structure. I also love this quilt because it was one of the first opportunities that I had in my quilting journey to deliberately break the law that the quilt police was setting. So from that point, the quilt police officer in the front, she said, you don't overstitch, we don't overstitch, we don't waste thread. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna waste some more thread. Like, watch me waste this thread, knowing that it really was not a waste of thread because it achieved the purpose, which was to have a brightly colored, high contrast quilt that I could show off with the quilting, because the quilting was the part that I was good at. It's literally the only part of quilt making that I'm good at, is the quilting. And so I was like, I'm gonna keep on showing off. So I have another stack of quilts here that I want to show you that they're in no particular order. So I'm going to tell you a little about each one. And if you didn't know this about me already, you'll figure this out by the end of tonight. I'm a very long-winded person and I could just keep talking and talking and talking all day. So I had to pare down what I'm able to show you into 45 minutes instead of 45 hours. So this is another quilt. This is a graffiti quilting quilt. And you'll start to see a continuing theme in my work that is very bright and in your face and high contrast, because like I said, the quilting is the part that I'm good at. So it's the part that I like to brag about when I am quilting. But one thing that has really helped me as an artist while developing and pioneering graffiti quilting is my ability to learn when to speak up and when to not speak up. And I've really started to learn and embrace how free motion quilting and choosing quilt motifs in general can really inform the story that you're trying to tell with your quilt, or the message that you're trying to convey with your quilt. Now for me, I convey my messages through the quilting, where others might convey it through the piecing design or through a computerized design that has something specific, or the fabric choices or the color choices. There are so many ways as quilters that we can make statements and say things with our quilts and tell stories with our quilts. And for me, the thread standing out and showing those shapes and those forms is the way that I like to tell those stories. So this is a quilt that I made as part of a demonstration for my graffiti quilting online course. And so the cool thing about this one is, as I was making this quilt, like what I would give to go back in time and have the footage of me actually stitching this quilt, I don't have that. But with this quilt, I do. And that's really, really super cool, because it's like I can explain to people how I did what I did, but now I can also be like, here's a video, go watch what I did. And that's really kind of cool too. To be able to share that expertise and that knowledge in ways more than just telling stories with the finished quilt, but saying like, let's go on this journey together. And you can see it unfold and be born in real time. So this next quilt is a really fun one. This fabric is hand-dyed fabric that I did in college. So I did end up going to college. It took me 6 years to get my associate's degree. And I feel like the thing that actually convinced me to finish my associate's degree is because I tested out of the math requirement. And I was like, dang it, I will not let that achievement go to waste. So I finished my associate so that I never have to think about doing math on a college level again. But one of the classes that I had in college, it was an honors English course. But really it was just a front for hand dyeing fabric, because the English teacher, she was also a textile artist, and she would make quilts. I actually got to quilt a few of them, which is really cool. But all of her quilts were made with her own hand-dyed fabric. So this was a piece of fabric that I dyed in her class. And the quilting is actually a digital design that I digitized. So as I have done graffiti quilting over the course of my career, I've had lots of people who say, teach me how to do that. And they take my class. And then I have some who say, I don't want to learn how to do it. I just want to stitch it out. So can you make it into a digital design? And so that's what I did with this. So this is actually a computerized quilting design that you can stitch out over and over again. And then on the back of this piece, I used silk fabric and with black thread on both sides. And I love this quilt because it's such a good illustration of how the fabric and the thread can inform each other and kind of say a different statement. Like this side is really kind of subtle and regal and kind of calm, I would say, where there's still a lot of motifs happening, but it's kind of more unified in its calmness because of that single gray silk color, where this one is like very loud and poppy and a little bit more hectic and causes your eye to move around a little bit more because the color is also informing the stitching. So this next quilt, I think I named this quilt Think Pink, but I should have named it something like Stiffy or something because it is so stiff. So this quilt, I used 30 weight thread on the front. So like all of that pink that you see is from the thread on plain black Kona cotton fabric. And I used 2 layers of warm and plush batting. And so this quilt is like very, very stiff, which I love. I love my wall hangings to be so stiff that like I don't need to frame them if I don't want to, and they'll just like hang nice and flat on the wall. So this is another demonstration piece that I did for one of my graffiti quilting class live stream sessions, showing just lots of different motifs and how they can work together. So let me show you this on the overhead. So you can see how thick and bold this pink thread is. Honestly, I struggled with this thread. Like the back is not perfect. I used a 40 weight thread on the back, and you can see I got a lot of what I like to call French knots with the tension of the thread. So this is a good quilt because it kind of shows you behind the kimono a little bit in like, I know that I might seem like I'm perfect at quilting, but I even still have mistakes and I still have struggles. And sometimes, you know, my tension still gives me headaches. But it's all in the learning. And now I look at this finished quilt and I'm still very happy about it. And I like how it turned out because it's just another cobblestone in the journey of my free motion quilting experience and adventure. So this next one is really super cool. This is actually a computerized quilting design. So the main motif in the center, I digitized this and it's kind of like a puzzle. So it's called the Scalable Wholecloth collection. And the reason that it's so cool is because each of these different colors are a different like section of the computerized design. And the way I digitized it is that each section of color has a jump stitch to the next color. So on your quilting machine, you can have your settings put to pause between jumps. And then anytime your machine pauses, you know that you're ready to change to the next color. So this allows you to do 29 different colors in a medallion. And then even though it's one big circle medallion, because each of those designs is kind of a separate chunk, you can expand this up and quilt a quilt up to about 70 inches with this motif, just depending on your machine's throat space and how you set up the design. And then around the edges, I free motion quilted all of these edge filler designs on my domestic sewing machine. And these are 30 different fillers that are in my graffiti quilting textbook. So when I was quilting this, I filmed all the footage, and now all of my graffiti quilting students can watch all of the videos for all these different fillers. And I filmed them on a sit-down machine and a stand-up quilting machine, so you can see it based on whatever orientation of machine you're on. So let me show you a quilt that I did make on my stand-up long arm quilting machine. So this was another sample from my graffiti quilting class where I filmed all of the footage of making it. So the big stars, this is a custom printed quilt top from Honest Fabric, so there's no piecing in it, even though it totally looks pieced. But inside the stars, I did free motion graffiti quilting, and then in all the negative space, I quilted the different free motion fillers in different sections. So this is that quilt. Isn't that so cute? So Honest Fabric is a custom printing quilt top company that my husband and I founded in 2018 that specializes specifically in large format quilt tops. So if you're like me and you just want to spend more time quilting, and piecing is just kind of a means to an end to get to the quilting machine, these panels are wonderful because they look pieced and they have a really cute kind of patchwork aesthetic to them, but there are no seams anywhere. And so when you're quilting, it's just very nice and smooth, and you can really focus on the quilting. And it also reduces a lot of the stress of free motion quilting, because a lot of times when we're learning free motion quilting, it's on a quilt top that we've already spent anywhere from 10 to 100 hours piecing. And so that, I don't know about y'all, but that gives me anxiety to think, oh my gosh, I worked so hard on piecing this. What if I ruin it with the quilting? That is totally a legit fear that I have. And I love printed panels because it just releases that anxiety. Worst case scenario, I ruin it and throw it away and print another one. Best case scenario is that it turns out amazing. So this quilt is also really cool because I know that I like to quilt super densely. And so for the backing, I used fleece. And the texture is so fun when you're quilting with fleece backing, that the fleece just really adds this awesome dimension. And even though it's quilted super densely, it's still snuggly. Like, this is still a quilt that I could snuggle up with on the couch because it's not stiff from all the thread, because I gave it a good soft batting as well as fleece. So maybe one question you have, I get asked this question a lot with fleece backing. Do I still add batting? Yes, I still add batting. So I always have batting in my quilt, whether I'm using a fleece backing or a plush blanket or a minky, whatever, I still always add batting. So there is another custom printed quilt top. So this one has been through the wash a few more times than that one, so it's got a more crinkle to it. But this is another good example. Oh, because that was, okay, the other thing that the quilt police lady said when she was like, I could have quilted a whole king size quilt. Another thing that she said when I responded back to her, she just, before she walked away, she goes, well, I only make functional quilts that keep people warm. And I was like, okay, well, challenge accepted. Here's a functional quilt that's going to keep everybody warm. So anyways, I like to brag about that. Is that okay? Sure, yes, it's a flex to make somebody a quilt that they can snuggle with, but it's also a flex to make something so cool that they hang and look at every single day. Be so for real. Both things can be awesome. Anyways, you can tell that I've healed from this trauma, and now it just makes for really great stories. And luckily, I feel like the quilt police are they're either not, they don't exist as much as they used to, or people are just a lot more accepting and less like mean about it. Sorry, I'm trying to not say swear words. They're like less mean than they used to be about quilting, so that's good. But also when people point that out to me, I say, yeah, you're welcome, because I had to step to all of the mean quilt police who said really mean stuff over the last 10 years. And now they're not saying as much mean stuff because I'm clapping back. So anyways, so this is a custom printed quilt top called Rainbow A-Go-A-Go. And so cute and so fun. And the other thing I love about quilt tops with graffiti quilting is that I know that I am a braggy quilter. Like, I like to show off with the quilting. Again, it's the one thing in this world that I'm good at, so I'm gonna like really like work. But I love the different custom printed quilt tops from Honest Fabric because it provides to me a challenge in a really good, healthy way. Like, you guys can probably tell just from the last half hour of me talking that like I'm a challenging person. And so if I can channel that channel that challenge into something productive, I really thrive on that. And I really like that. So I like this panel a lot because it gave me just enough space to interpret those rows and kind of organize my thoughts with my quilting, but then of course still provides all of this wide open space that to me just feels like a pasture to play in. It's just a place to romp around in the hay and really enjoy the free motion quilting and see the motion that comes out of my body. I think one thing that is so beautiful about free motion quilting is that these shapes only exist from my body. Like, when you do your free motion quilting, that only exists because your body is exerting the energy and the motion to do that. And I just think there's something so beautiful about that, that like now when I am given a quilt that is free motion quilted, like I know as quilters, it's our inclination to be like, don't look too close. Like, don't scrutinize it. But like, that bump is because like your muscle had a bump or because something happened, but it was your body that was doing it. And I think that's so beautiful and valuable. And anyways, I will die on that hill of just continuing to reaffirm how amazing free motion quilting can be as we tell these stories, as we show our love to other quilters through quilting form, or to other people, right? They oftentimes are not even also quilters, but I don't know. I think there's just something really beautiful about that. And so when I think about like teaching people how to free motion quilt, that's my whole goal, is to help you close that gap between your good taste and your skills, so that when you present a gift, you can present it proudly, even with all of its bumps and mistakes and bruises and whatever that looks like. So the back of this quilt is also a fleece blanket, which again, hopefully you can see the texture really nicely with that fleece. That's really super fun. I also tend to lean towards solid colored fabrics because I enjoy the quilting showing up, right? Like, I want the quilt to be noticed. That was another thing that I think the quilt police, they'd be like, your bobbin and your top thread need to match, and you need to just match your quilt top fabric so that if there's any issues with your tension, no one will notice. And I'm like, okay, how about we just address our tension issues and fix them so that we can use any thread under the sun, whatever color it is or whatever thickness or weight it is, we can really like brag a little bit about our quilting and let it show up. Okay, so this next one is really fun because this is a good example of using non-traditional fabrics in your quilting. So this one is so fun. The fabric is super shiny and silver. I learned later, after making this quilt, it's like the type of fabric that you make like reusable refrigerator grocery bags out of, because it has like thermal insulation in it. But it was on sale at Joanns and it was shiny, so I bought it. And I just quilted on it. And then I also used a variegated sock yarn and my couching foot. So let me show you this one closer. So this has all kinds of different colors of yarn, but it's actually from one single skein of yarn that I'm assuming you would like knit into socks or something that would end up being stripy. but I just loved it so much, and it was it ran so smoothly through my couching foot that it was just really addicting to quilt with. And so I would try to kind of plan out different motifs as the variegation changed, but that wasn't always possible. And so you see a lot of, I don't know, mix and match, but it's really cool that this was all just one piece, one skein of yarn for the whole quilt. And it's super shiny. All right, so this next one is also really fun. This is another computerized quilting design that was derived from a free motion design that I did. And this is a black satin fabric. I've quilted on black satin quite a bit, and it never gets boring for me. I love the shine of it. Oh yeah, like look at that glare. So nice and shiny. And then for the back of it, I also used like a silver silk fabric. So super fun. And then the thread on this one, here I'll show you closer. The thread on this one is called Hollow Shimmer, and it totally looks like what I imagine mermaid hair looks like, or like the tail of a unicorn. It's just so pretty and sparkly, and I thought it worked really nicely with that satin. Okay, let's see. So this next one, this is fun. This is a cute little one. You could almost like call it a hot pad or something, but I would never put hot, dirty dishes on this. But this is a fun little practice piece that I made for one of the sections of my graffiti quilting textbook called the Brainstorm Challenge. So let me show you this one up close as well. So this one is really cool because I made it in real time as I was writing the book. So let me actually show you. So this monstrosity is the graffiti quilting textbook that comes with your welcome package when you do the graffiti quilting course. But in part 6, I made this quilt that you see here. And let's see, that way. And while I was making the quilt, I was filming all of the footage of it for the demonstration. So like there's a QR code here that leads to this whole demonstration for this section. And so the way that we did it is I drew on my iPad, and then I stitched it out on the fabric. And so you can see as the quilt started to grow, and you can read it in the textbook, or you can also watch the video of it actually being made. Kind of cool. So that one's really fun. And this is a really cool satin style blue fabric that's really nice and shiny. Okay. This next one, really beautiful. So the back of this is black satin. So this is actually a computerized quilting design called the Take Flight Butterfly Collection. And it's a perfectly symmetrical design. So you can stitch it out in sections larger than this, or you can just stitch it out the width of your, or the depth of your quilting machine, or the maximum area of your embroidery hoop. And then on the front of it, I stitched it on oh my gosh, why is the word escaping me? Batik, hand-dyed fabric. So that one's really pretty. And the stitching is really, really nice and organized and precise. Which that's what I love about designing computerized quilting designs, is like pushing technology to its limits to get like perfect precision, but then also doing things that are a little unconventional, like forcing it to overstitch or forcing it to have multiple parts that you have to adjust your machine. Like I think my designs are really great and versatile, but then they also challenge the quilter in different ways, which is kind of nice. Some people hate that, but a lot of people like it. So this is another stitch out of that same design. So this fabric, I don't even know what this is. It's like basically plastic, but it is so pretty and shiny. And so I really loved stitching that out because that texture, like it looks like a piece of sheet metal that has been carved into. That texture is amazing. And then this blue satin is the same as that little mini quilt that I showed you from the book. So One thing that does not scare me about quilting is trying quilting non-traditional fabrics. Like if it's anything but quilting cotton, I'll try it at least twice usually, because it's so fun to just see where that can open a new door of creativity in a very low stress way. It's like, just get a fat quarter of it, and if it sucks, then don't show it to anybody. Okay, so here's another one. This is similar to the Think Pink design, but in blue. And another kind of, like I said, cobblestone in my journey of graffiti quilting, and especially in my journey of teaching graffiti quilting. One thing that I've learned over the course of my career, that it's one thing to practice an art form and progress at your skills. It's another to figure out how to verbalize and put vocabulary to it so that other people can transfer that information and education into their brain, which is, I don't know, it's been a really cool journey that I still think to myself, like, I can't believe I'm a professional quilter. Like, I can't believe that people want to hang out with me and quilt all day. That's like the coolest thing ever. So it's cool to see, it's cool to show you parts of my journey, and hopefully you can see some of the evolution that has taken place. This next quilt is really cool because it's a good illustration of how fabric and thread color can influence each other. So this is another thing that we talk about in the graffiti quilting curriculum, is how thread and fabric colors can influence each other. So this particular quilt, the thread colors that I chose, I used the exact same thread on the top and the bobbin, but you can see how they show up differently on white fabric versus black fabric. So when I chose the thread colors, I knew that the black was going to be the front of my quilt. And so I was able to gauge that those thread colors were going to show up really brightly. Now, if I wanted the white to be the front, then I probably would have chosen thread that's even a little bit darker and richer and deeper in color than this, because when I, pull it further away, you can see it does kind of wash out a little bit on white, versus on the black, it seems like it really pops and shows up well. And neither of those are right or wrong, but it's just cool to be able to illustrate that point to my students so that they can make informed decisions on their quilting journey for what kind of style and aesthetic they want to go for. Now, graffiti quilting was really born out of multiple things, but one of them was rebellion. Like, that's why I named it graffiti quilting, is because there are aspects of graffiti that have this kind of same vibe, I guess you could say, as graffiti quilting. One is like breaking the rules and understanding why you're breaking them. Like, there's a difference between a beautiful piece of graffiti style art and a tag, where where the equivalent of quilting would be like if you just scribbled and it was mindless and not thoughtful in the shape that you were doing or the color that you were doing. But when you take the time to really consider all of your decisions and what rules you are going to break very mindfully, and with like kind of this informed consent around what rule you're breaking and why you're breaking it, so that you can defend that decision. That's a really cool thing as an artist to be able to do. I mean, one thing that I realized in college was how much I hated critique days. Like in the art classes that I did take, there would be like one day every other week where literally everyone would just hang up their piece and we would sit there and talk about it. And it was not enjoyable, but one thing that it taught me was to learn how to defend my decisions as an artist. Defend why I chose the thread color, why I chose the pattern, why I chose the shape, the size, the fabric style, right? Like all of those things. And so as quilters, we can, just because we are learning the rules of quilting, that doesn't mean we can't break them. It's just about choosing which rules to break and being able to defend why we break them. All right, so this last quilt I want to show you, I'm doing so good at time. Can I just point out really quick that like I'm on track for time? I'm usually over all the time. So this last quilt I want to show you is one that I am very super proud of, because so when I introduced myself at the beginning, I made it very clear that I am a free motion quilter who happens to piece sometimes in order to get to the quilting. The quilt I want to finish by showing you is really a cool one because it is absolutely not perfect. Like I wrote a blog post about it that I can send y'all a link to. I talked about this quilt and how grueling it was and how long it took me to make it. And I point out all of the mistakes in this quilt, not because I'm trying to be self-deprecating, but more about like learning how to remain humble while also appreciating and respecting the piece of art that this is in its flaws, in its entirety, right? So like when I say I'm not a piecer, this is like very much this is probably the hardest thing I've ever pieced, and I'll never make it again because of that. But I loved quilting this because it was like the ultimate opportunity to confront my anxiety about ruining a quilt top that I took so long to piece. Like this feels like a notch in my belt because it challenged me in so many ways. And now being out on the other side, it's one of those things that's like when you get the best workout and you're so sore the next day, but every time you feel that muscle, you're like, oh, I'm sore, but like I'm buff, like, right? And you can recognize both of those things. So this quilt is like for sure a flex. But then I was also like, this is hard. I don't want to do it anymore. So it's a good example of the opposition that we sometimes feel in our artistic journey, especially as quilters. Like the quilt that we start and then we're like, oh my gosh, I bit off way more than I should chew. So yeah, so this quilt is a Lone Star, and it's actually improv pieced in the sense that I just knew I wanted to make a Lone Star quilt. And so I just found like a YouTube tutorial on how to make each of these blocks. But then after those were done, it was like, all right, what am I going to put in here? I know it has to be a right angle, like a quarter of a triangle or a half of a square. What do I want to put there? And so I ended up fussy cutting some fabric. So these pieces are not pieced. Let me show you up close. So each of these fussy cut pieces in the middle, this whole area is actually one piece of fabric. So this is from Giucy Giuce, Giuseppe Robato. He's a fabric designer. It's from his Quantum line of fabric. So that's cool because that's kind of a flex. I get to take credit and make it look like I pieced it, even though I totally didn't. And then here's the other companion fussy cut piece. But like the shape wasn't quite right. And so I added these borders down here and then, added borders here. And then let me see if I can show you. I'm going to like fold it into quarters because it is symmetrical throughout the quilt. But after interpretively quilting each of the sections, then around the edge, oh my gosh, and it's so heavy because I used a layer of batting and a fleece blanket or like a plush blanket. But then in each of the corners, I did free motion graffiti quilting. So each of the corner areas of quilting are different motifs of graffiti quilting. And let me show you again with my overhead camera so you can see nice and clearly. So I have different motifs in this area versus the other corner. These are all different. Like I didn't try to keep that symmetry going that I had in the middle of the quilt, but just did free motion instead. So you can see how there's different motifs together. So that one is really fun to show. I also was excited to show you guys that one because when I like travel to do speaking engagements, this quilt's like 49 pounds all by itself. And so there's no way I can bring it in my luggage. So that's a fun one to show. And it's one that I love taking on like road trips because while it was a quilt that I created with so much like anxiety in my bones, now it's one that I feel like I can infuse with love and enjoyment because even when I see all the little mistakes in it, I'm like, man, I made that. Oh my gosh, like I'm amazing. It's one of those flex quilts that's like, wow, I hope that every quilter at some point in their journey has that experience where they're like, I can't believe I made that. I'm so cool, because we all should have that. And then, okay, so last thing I wanted to show you were a couple of fun backpacks. So today is actually kind of a special day because I just launched a pattern for making a quilted fabric backpack. But these ones, I wanted to show them to you because the quilting on them is so, so cool. So this fabric is just Kona cotton solid fabric that I turned into a backpack. And you can see the quilting really nice and deep and rich. So this was another demonstration piece of fabric that I quilted for my students. And then after it was done, I was like, I need to make something out of this. And so I turned it into a backpack. And then this is my latest finish where I quilted on that black satin fabric again. Let me show you this one up close too. So it's black satin fabric with white thread. And I actually made it for a rapper whose concert I'm going to on Sunday. Her name's Queen Herbie, and I'm like obsessed with her. And so I'm gonna try to see if I can give her this when I go to her show. But yeah, so these are kind of fun because they're just a really cool, like they scratch the itch for me in sometimes thinking like, okay, I have like 1.5 billion mini quilt wall hangings of graffiti quilting. What else can I do so that I can enjoy the quilting more than just like hanging everything on my wall in my house? So the backpacks were fun. So if you want to make your own backpack, it's a pattern that comes with 10 different sizes for making your backpack. And it's called the Choose Your Own Adventure Quilted Backpack because there's lots of fun little side quests in there. So anyways, okay, I did so good on time. Pat myself on the back. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be able to share this conversation with you and show you some of the history of graffiti quilting and the journey and where it all came from. And yeah, if you want to really accelerate your free motion quilting skills, I would love for you to check out my graffiti quilting online class. And yeah, any questions?
Question was, when you were working for the longarm manufacturer, what kind of designs were you doing, testing out, you know, the stitch out?
Yeah, that's a great.
Yeah.
What was that last part? What was the last part she said?
She said she wants them all.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Yeah, let me draw them for you. I can show you. So there were 4 patterns that we had to do that tested different functions of the machine. And these are off the top of my head, so I'm pretty sure this is what they are. So the first one is doing cinnamon rolls. And this would test to make sure that the stitch regulator could work in every direction. So as well as with speed. So as long as we weren't getting skip stitches on like any direction, that would make sure that the timing was right. And then another one was like changing directions quickly. So we had to do a star like that. And that was also like in precision regulated mode. If the star point looked kind of like this with the stitching, like as if it wasn't quite hitting that point like it's supposed to, that would like verify that the precision. And then another one was like puzzle pieces stippling. And that I think was also testing the change of direction, but then also the stitch regulation and the tension. So this one was really big on tension. So if you're familiar with like tension on a machine, whenever you do a super tight curve, that hairpin curve is always going to be the most susceptible to eyelashes or skip stitches. So like for instance, if you do a tight curve and it skips the stitches like that, and then all of a sudden your thread is going like that, you know that your timing is off. Or if you do a tight curve like this, and then you flip the quilt over and you see eyelashes like that, that means that your top tension is too loose or your bobbin case is too tight. So when that was one of the most valuable parts of learning how to run a quilting machine, was literally testing it, because anytime it wasn't stitching perfect, I had to know how to fix it, either through adjusting the tension or making sure that all the cables were plugged in, or sending it back to the guy who puts the hook in to set the timing. I had to know what to diagnose in order to get it in the right workflow so that it could be adjusted, so that it could come back to testing, because the testing team was like the final step before it got sent into shipping. And then there was one other design. Oh, I remember what it was. So the last design was where we would go straight up and down. So like back and forth and then side to side. And this was testing a couple things. So if the stitches were like fine up and down, but then when we go this way, all of a sudden the stitches get really big like that, then that means one of the encoders is not working, or it's not plugged in all the way, because it's like not regulating the stitches to be tight like it's supposed to. And then same with up and down. So like if you get long stitches up and down, it means your machine encoder is defective or not functioning properly. And if you get long stitches from left to right, it means that your carriage encoder. Anyways, that's maybe getting more technical than you were asking for, but yeah, that's kind of a crash course in testing your machine to make sure that it's functioning properly.
Okay, we have another question. What adjustments do you make to your long arm when you're working on satin and the other non-traditional fabrics?
Good question. So it's actually kind of surprising that you really don't have to make any adjustments to your machine settings for specific fabrics. Maybe it could mean changing your needle. Like if you're using a certain, like you want a sharper needle if you're using a woven, because a duller needle can sometimes cut the weave. But really it mostly depends on your thread. So anytime you need to, like let's say you're doing black satin, right? I could stitch this like normal with whatever needle is in my machine typically, because I'm usually just using like a 16 or an 18. But if I wanted to do metallic unicorn hair type thread, that's when I would need to adjust my tension, my bobbin tension, maybe the needle I'm using, maybe my stitch length. But really when it comes to the fabrics, you'd be surprised at how little you have to change. Like your machine doesn't really know the difference between a fleece backing or a batik quilt top or a satin. And even on a sit-down machine, that also doesn't really detect the difference in fabric. If it can pierce through it just like it would quilting cotton, it's fine. On a sit-down quilting machine, sometimes it can get slipperier because those fabrics are slippery for your hands. And so making sure that your quilt top is basted well when you're on a sit-down or a domestic machine is helpful. But yeah, I would say if you can get better acquainted with adjustments for the thread types you're using, then using non-traditional fabric types can be really not any different than just quilting cottons. So, good question.
The question was, do you have favorite threads?
Yes, lots of them. One thing that I've learned is, okay, so there's like a spectrum of thread usage, right? There's like the people over here who say, I only use this brand and I only use this type because when I bought my quilting machine, the dealer told me to only use this brand and only use this type. And then I'm over on the other side of the spectrum that's like, I'll put anything in there twice. Can I fit it through the eye of the needle? Okay, let's try it. And so I think it's less about good and bad or right and wrong thread choices. It's more about being willing to speed date lots of different threads and find out what you like. So I know that kind of answered your question, but really didn't. So me personally, my favorites, just from my own opinion, I really like Quilt Maker from YLI. That one's a really good solid workhorse. It's a 40 weight thread. Super Strong from YLI is really great for piecing, especially if you're gonna make a backpack or something functional. The quilting, you can use whatever quilting thread you want. Like for free motion quilting, I really like sulky 40 weight rayon. That one's really beautiful because it's 40 weight, so it's decent strong and decent thickness, but it shines like embroidery thread, which I really like. And then also, this is a little surprising, but one of my go-to free motion quilting threads is invisible thread. So sulky invisible thread. I know YLI also makes an invisible thread. I just got some at a quilt show. I haven't tried it yet, so I can't endorse it, but I would assume it's probably good because YLI has a good reputation. But invisible thread is awesome because it allows you to add texture to the quilt without detracting from any of the colors of the fabric. So it's a nice one when, like me, I'm a show off with quilting, especially if I'm quilting for someone else. Sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna do so amazing at the quilting that I should choose invisible thread so that I don't like upstage the design. And I can then become like a good supporting actor for the quilt top because that texture is still really beautiful and you can see it. But at the end of the day, when they look at the quilt top, they just appreciate the color and the fabric choice and the piecing. And then the quilting, no matter how over the top or amazing or perfect it is, it's still always the supporting actor to the quilt top. So invisible thread can be really fun as well.
Any other questions for Carly?
Can we see the rainbow puppy?
Yeah.
Did you see my rainbow puppy?
The tie-dye dog, yeah.
Lola! Come here. She's warm color on one side and cool color on the other side. Hi. Will you smile? Say cheese. Sometimes she'll get this really goofy grin. I don't know if she'll do it. Cheese. Come on. Okay, get down. I just did her hair like 2 days ago, so it's like super, super fresh and clean.
Very cute, very cute.
Thanks.
Yes. How do you baste your quilts?
So I baste my quilts a few different ways depending on what project I'm doing. So on a long arm quilting machine, obviously we don't have to baste because our pulls do all that work for us. If I am doing a quilt on my sit down quilting machine, I like to just use a little bit of quilt basting spray. It doesn't take a lot, a little bit goes a long way, but do not use spray glue. Like, don't use Elmer's spray glue. I know it's cheaper, and I know that your wallet is going to be like, it's spray glue, just use that. Don't use that. Can you tell that I'm talking from experience? Because I used Elmer's spray glue, and it gummed up the hook in my machine, and luckily, I know a bunch of people who know how to fix quilting machines, and I was okay, but yeah. So I like to use like quilt basting spray that is designated specifically for fabric. Not only to protect the machine, but then it also, you know, I don't need it to be all like gooey and gummy or have overspray. But sometimes if I'm feeling lazy and I can't find my spray or I run out or whatever, even just some safety pins in the four corners of a small quilt is okay. You can baste using safety pins like every 4 inches or so, or some quilting machines like sit down machines or even domestic machines will have a built-in basting stitch where you move it around and it'll stitch for you. In fact, I can show you on this machine. Let's see if I turn this down really far. So you can use your quilting machine as your basting and you just do really large stitches. So like if I think I'm gonna kind of go this direction with my quilting and I want to baste it down, I just turn my speed very far down and I can actually still go a little faster than that. And then if I just do large stitches as I go, then those are like little safety pins doing their job. And I typically, if I'm machine basting like this, I like to baste in the direction that I know I'm going to be filling in my fabric. And then when I'm working on that specific area, I can just cut out my stitches as I go. And then I don't have to stitch over them because I also don't love the idea of having to pull out basting stitches after I've quilted it, especially when I quilt so densely. But if I know that I'm going to come to this area, then I can just cut those basting stitches out the same way I would pull out a safety pin. So that's a really nice way to do it. I did also recently get some water soluble thread, and that could be interesting. So I basted a pretty large quilt because I knew it, even though it was on my long arm, I knew that I was going to be advancing the fabric back and forth because I'm quilting it in a spiral from the center outward. And so I've never tried it before, but I basted every like couple inches in a spiral with water soluble thread in the bobbin and on top. And I have not washed it out yet because I'm not done with that quilt. So I can't fully endorse it. I just know that it exists, and that could be maybe another option too. The only other thing I've seen water soluble thread for is for people who like prank each other with like swimming trunks that fall apart when you get them wet. And I have not done that. So, but yeah, that's another way that you could baste as well. But the quilt basting spray, I would say, is probably my go-to just because it works really well, and it's water soluble. So I know that if I ever wash the quilt, it's going to come out, but also it doesn't have to come out. Like, it's basically just a sprayable layer of stabilizer. And so, yeah. So yeah, quilt basting spray I think is a good choice. And just learning how to put that together is beneficial.
She said that you mentioned 2 layers of batting. Is that normal for you?
So it depends on the project. If I'm doing a functional bed quilt, I'll just use 1 layer of batting, just like normal. But if I'm doing a wall hanging that's going to be a piece of art, or if I know I'm going to turn it into something functional, then I will use 2 layers of fabric, or sorry, 2 layers of batting inside, just because I know that I like that stiffness. I like to think of making a wall hanging quilt as like the thread is the accessories, the fabric is the skin, and the batting is the muscle, and the backing is the bones. And so if you give your quilt enough muscle, then when you put clothes on it and skin on it, it's going to be nice and filled out and have a good shape to it. So I like to use 2 layers of batting when I'm making a wall hanging so that I know that it's going to be nice and stiff. If I want to thumbtack it to my wall, it's not going to be wavy. So yeah, I like to, my main go-to batting brand is Warm and Natural, or Warm Company. So I keep Warm and Natural and Warm and Plush on hand, and I'll choose usually between those 2 depending on the project that I'm working on. But yeah, it's definitely common for me. It's almost a default for me that if I'm doing a wall hanging style quilt that I know is going to be very densely quilted, I'll always use 2 layers of batting.
Okay. Anybody else?
What applications do you use? I see on your iPad or on your screen as you're drawing. Is that just like sort of like a whiteboard app, or what do you use to design your electronic apps?
Great question. So the app that I use on my iPad is called Procreate. So that's the app that you see here, and it is actually really good for quilt design. So let me show you. So here's a quilt that I actually just finished. Actually, you know what? It's just, let me go get it so I can show it to you guys. I haven't posted about it yet online, but it's just hanging over on my frame. But I can show you the diagram that I came up with on the iPad and then show you the finished quilt. So this is a custom printed quilt top from Honest Fabric. The design is called Alma, and it was designed by Jen Belknap. And so this was actually for my Graffiti Quilting 2025 cohort. With every cohort that I do, we do 5 live streams over the course of the year. And then we do a 6th live stream the following spring. So I just did my 2025 cohort's 6th class just a couple months ago. And we talked about this panel and how to interpret it for graffiti quilting. So take a gander at that. And then let me show you the finished quilt. It's so exciting. And it felt so good to just pull it off of my frame yesterday. So here it is with the graffiti quilting inside. Can you see that okay? Can you see the quilting?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So you can see how we interpreted it with the different designs coming out of the hearts layers. Turned out so cute. And then I used fleece backing for this one as well, so you can see the texture really, really well on that too.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So yeah, so the app is called Procreate, and it's really nice and easy to use. Like whenever I want to do a new quilt top, let me pull up. Okay, so I'll go to Honest Fabric.com. Okay, so let's see. Let's go to one of the more traditional quilt tops. So needlecraft, quilting. So, okay, so here's a good example of like a really traditional quilt top, the Stera quilt top. So if I see a quilt top that I like, I can just take a screenshot of it, and then I can go back to Procreate and photo, and then tap that photo. And now I can create a new layer, and I can even turn this layer down and make it just a little more transparent so I can see my quilting. And then let's say I want to interpret or practice interpreting some of those blocks before I get to my quilting machine, and I just want to play, then I can do that here. And let's say, you know, I don't like what I did and I want to try something different, so I can try another layer. And decide, you know, how I want to quilt each of those shapes. Kind of cool. So, yeah.
Fun.
Thank you. Do you have any quilt-a-longs or any workshops coming up?
Yes, that's what I was just about to throw out there and let you guys know about. So my graffiti quilting online class, I teach it once a year, and it's a 6-month long course, but then you also get lifetime access to all of the content. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that in case it's something that any of you guys would want to do. So I've been able to travel a lot and teach in person over the years, which has been a wonderful opportunity. But now traveling has just gotten harder for me. I have 3 little kids, and so teaching my online course is my main point of access for graffiti quilting. Part of the class, I send out a welcome package to everybody. There are 5 monthly live streams that we do July, August, September, October, November. And those are usually about 3 hours long. And you can watch the replays of those as well. You don't have to be there for the live, but being at the live is really fun. It's the second Saturday of each month. And then in this following spring, we'll do like a catch-all Q&A session. But then you also get access to all of that content. So in the textbook for the course, like I said, this big old giant monstrosity, there are over 100 QR codes that are embedded throughout the book that will lead you to online on-demand content that you can watch at any point in time in the future or throughout the class. So typically I have my students read the 2 chapters that we'll be talking about in the class. And so you scan the QR codes and you can watch those at your leisure. And there's over 100 hours of on-demand content that you get lifetime access to. And the other cool thing about it is that once you sign up for the graffiti quilting course, you get access to anything in the future that I add. So for instance, I just did another one of the design challenges in the book and documented the whole process. When I add that to the online course curriculum, I send out an email newsletter to all of my alumni students saying, here are all the new things in the class. So you can go to the same pages in your textbook, scan the QR codes, and all of that updated information is there. So I find that a lot of my students end up keeping their textbook right by their quilting machine just because it's such a good, easy access for so many different free motion quilting ideas as you are learning how to free motion quilt. So even if you're not wanting to do graffiti quilting style quilting on every single quilt, there's so much in the book that just gives you a really rounded out, strong sense of free motion quilting in general. And you can either read the book from cover to cover and go on this journey page by page, or you can skip throughout the book and go to something that intrigues you and scan that QR code and really dive into that particular thing. So graffiti quilting is, like, I try not to brag more than I should, but I am really proud of the textbook and the curriculum and the whole online structure to make sure that all of my students feel very encouraged and motivated and supported in their free motion quilting journey. And I would argue that the graffiti quilting curriculum is one of the best bang for your buck on the market that you're going to find for long-term access to such a robust and comprehensive class. So that's my main thing that I have going on is graffiti quilting. I teach that once a year. So I kind of do a tidal wave every year where registration opens in the spring, and then we start the first class in July, and we do the monthly sessions, and then we break in November for everyone to enjoy their holidays or get through their holidays, depending on how you feel. And then usually in February or March, we do kind of a final live stream to just help you round out everything you've learned in the book and answer any lingering questions. So like the questions that you guys asked just at the end of this demonstration were great ones that are answered in the book. And then as I get new questions, I'm like, oh, that's really smart to include that. And so I compile that footage and put it in the curriculum. And you have this like living, breathing, growing dictionary or encyclopedia that will continue to grow along with your skills. And you get all of that for the one registration price that you only pay once. So yeah, any questions about the class?
No, Tara and I were just saying it'd be nice to kind of get a group together.
Yes, okay, so I do have some guilds and some quilt shops who have coordinated where all of the people who register for the class, they meet together and watch the live stream. Like you can totally do that. You can meet at a quilt shop or meet at a designated space for your guild where you can watch the live streams together as a group. That's totally awesome. Yeah. And it would just be fun to hang out together. So if you enjoyed this, the last, hour that we've had together, 2 hours, the class is more of this. It's really interactive and really like, I feel like I'm 80% educational and 20% entertaining, which is like, I'm proud of that. If I wasn't a quilting teacher, I would try to be like a motivational stand-up comedian. So I just now try to smush those all together and do all of it in front of a camera. So.
Well, this has been wonderful. I think we've all enjoyed this evening, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.